Yo, what's going on guys? Welcome back to my channel and welcome to the second video in this 10-part mini-series, the SMPT Guide to Flexible Dieting. And so what we're going to be covering in today's video then is we are going to be exposing the myths. There are so many unbelievably deceiving myths in and around the fitness industry, some of which I used to believe myself, believe me, and I know a lot of people still do believe them. So the whole point of this video is just to clear up a few of those myths, because what you've got to understand is with flexible dieting, it actually breaks a lot of the myths that you actually find in the fitness industry. With the concept of flexible dieting and stuff, it defies a lot of the logic that the common member of the public will often believe in. So I think it's really, really important before we get into the nitty-gritty stuff about flexible dieting, we go through and expose those myths so that you can kind of get a clear head, ignore the shit that you see in the industry, and so you can fully understand what you're about to learn with flexible dieting. Before we get started though, I'm kind of just looking at myself in the camera here and I'm like, I'm looking a bit small. Nah, yo, I can't have that. I can't record a video and look small. Nah, not in my world. So I'm going to make myself look tiny bit bigger by wearing something a bit different in 3, 2, 1. Alright, I'm feeling a bit bigger, looking a bit bigger. Let's carry on, shall we? So guys, we are going to kick off with the very first point then. And we're going to be talking about the big one. The one thing that I have to explain the most online, through my social media content, through general questions and stuff. And the one thing 90% of people still struggle to understand. And it's the whole good food versus bad food myth. And I really, really want to dive into this one a bit first. So, the first thing I need to say is, in the first video that I did in this series, I kind of touched upon about how foods have pretty much the same DNA. So I'm going to dive into that a little bit now. If we look at the human body, right? So every single human on this planet has, a DNA makeup. But my DNA makeup is going to be different to yours. But essentially, we all still have DNA. And you can kind of take that concept into the whole food situation as well. Every food that you will come across on this planet has calories inside, it has protein, carbs and fats. Every food on this planet without fail. But the difference is, every food that you will come across has a slightly different makeup of all of those elements. A piece of broccoli or a piece of kale versus an Oreo, let's say for example, both of those things will have different amounts of calories, different amounts of protein, different amounts of carbs, different amounts of fats. But essentially they all still contain the same elements. So with that in mind, with every single food on this planet being pretty much made up of the same things, just in different amounts, are there really such things as good and bad foods? Well, no, not exactly. But what should you be focusing on instead? How should you actually be looking at food? Well, this is where you need to kind of remember the whole idea of how body composition will change over time. If you want to change your physique, if you want to build muscle, if you want to drop body fat, something I mentioned in the first video was, of course, you need to be able to manipulate your calories to be in a calorie deficit, to drop body fat, and to be in a surplus to gain size. And then you also need to make certain adjustments to your macronutrient intakes. Remember in the first video how, of course, I spoke about, how it's important to manipulate your protein intake to suit your goals, and the same with carbs and fats as well. So really you have to actually look at each food that you consume in your diet, and you've got to understand how is that food going to contribute to, my calorie intake targets and my macronutrient intake targets. That's how you should be looking at food. You shouldn't be looking at them as good and bad. Instead, you should be looking at them, well, how can this food help me towards my intake targets? That is really how you've got to look at foods. There are no such thing as good and bad foods. Instead, you have to look at them just as what they are. Every food basically is calories, protein, carbs and fats. And then you've got to understand how are you going to take that food and how are you going to bring that into your diet, and how is it going to help you achieve the intake targets that you desire. So that's pretty much going to cover that one, guys. So guys, point number 2 then is going to be the whole myth surrounding meal and nutrient timing. And again, this is something that 99% of people will fall victim to at some point in their fitness journeys. I know for a fact that I did at the very start of my own. I was one of those guys that used to believe that, if I ate carbs after 6 p.m, that I would put on a horrendous amount of weight. And I believed that because some dickhead on the TV told me that's what happened. But of course, when I did my own research and I started to get into the industry a bit more, and I started to understand things a bit better, I quickly realized that the whole myth surrounding, nutrient and meal timing is basically a load of shit. And here's why. Because guys, what you've got to understand is that your body works in a 24-hour cycle, pretty much from the point that you wake up to the point that you wake up the next day. We all typically, kind of like wake up at similar times every single day. And that's just an example of your body working pretty much in a 24-hour window. And in that 24 hours, you'll do pretty much the same things. You will be doing some form of sleeping, you'll be doing some form of breathing, thinking. Your organs inside of you will constantly be working to help keep your body in normal order and keep it working at a functional level. In which point, of course, your metabolism is going to be working all the way throughout that. And when you understand that, you quickly realize that with your body working in a 24-hour cycle, your diet works in the exact same way. So providing that you get a sufficient amount of calories and adequate micronutrient and macronutrient intakes within that 24-hour window, you'll quickly realize that it doesn't really matter at what times that you eat. What really matters is getting all of those calories and getting those macronutrients into your system within each 24-hour cycle. So it doesn't really matter whether you have your final meal of the day at 5 p.m. or whether you have it at 11 p.m. What matters is that you actually get those calories and get those macros into your diet within each 24-hour cycle. So please do not be afraid to eat very late at night. Always remember that you have a 24-hour window in which to get your calories and macros in every single day. It doesn't really matter when you actually eat. Just kind of eat each meal that you have in your diet, depending on your lifestyle factors, depending on, when you're awake and things like that. Match it to your lifestyle, match it to your preferences. So if you want to have your final meal of the day at 5 p.m, be my guest. Or if you want to be a notorious calorie demolisher at night, like me, then have your final meal at 10 or 11 p.m. Always focus on what matters. Getting those calories and macros in within each 24-hour window. Got it? Good. Let's move on to point number 3. So guys, third point then is another classic myth, which is going to be about the anabolic window. Now, I'm sure we have all been there before where we have been told that if we don't get protein into our system 30 or 60 minutes after a workout, that we will potentially, quote unquote, lose the gains. I still remember those times where I literally used to run home after the gym, literally sprint back from the gym to my house to make sure that I got a protein shake in within like 20 minutes after my workout, because I was genuinely scared that if I'd have left it any longer, that I would actually be losing muscle. Yeah, I genuinely believe that. But, we all go through those stupid stages. But that myth is kind of born out of some truth. So, after a workout, guys, what you have to understand is that after a workout, your protein synthesis levels are pretty high. Protein synthesis basically refers to the amount of protein that is then absorbed into your body and is then used to kind of grow and repair muscle. The higher that level is, obviously, the more efficient and effectively the more muscle that you will build in that window of time. But everyone seems to think that that rate only applies 30 to 60 minutes after a workout, when in actual fact, your protein synthesis levels are at a heightened state up to 72 hours after a workout. 72 hours, not 30 or 60 minutes. So in that respect, when you understand that, you'll quickly realize that you don't actually need to consume protein within 30 or 60 minutes. Again, what matters is something that I've already mentioned in the first 2 points, is making sure that your calorie intake and your macronutrient intake overall is sufficient enough within that 72-hour window. And I think most people can achieve that. Unless you are literally going 72 hours after a workout and not consuming anything whatsoever, the chance of you losing any muscle or not building any muscle on top of that is very, very, very slim. So get this idea out of your head that you need to consume protein within 30 or 60 minutes. Because what you've got to understand is that your protein synthesis levels are at their highest up to 72 hours after a workout. So providing that you actually get your calories into the system and you get a sufficient amount of protein intake within a 24-hour period, like I mentioned on the last point, you're going to be fine. You're still going to build muscle. You're still going to repair. You're still going to grow. So just chill out, guys. Cool? Let's go on to the final point then. So guys, it is time for the final point then. And the last thing I want to cover then is the myth surrounding intermittent fasting versus flexible dieting. Which one is better for fat loss? So I'm going to kind of skim over this one a little bit, although you could have a full-on blown argument about this one. But for those of you who do not know, intermittent fasting is the idea that there is a period of time in a day where you will consume all of your calories, and then there is also a period of time where you completely fast and don't eat or drink anything. Typically, you will get all of your calories in between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. every single day, and then you will follow that with a 16-hour fasting period between 8 p.m. and 12 p.m. the following day. There is a certain belief that by intermittent fasting and by following the rules of fasting throughout the morning and things like that, that it is better for fat loss, that you achieve more success with fat loss due to the fasting period. But something I really want to remind you is what I mentioned earlier on in this video, is that with point number 2, it doesn't actually matter when you get your calories into your system, or when you get your macros in. What really matters is making sure that you achieve your calorie intake and your macronutrient intakes within a 24-hour period. So if you look at the outset, if you look at flexible dieting and if you look at intermittent fasting, both of these things work on making sure that you get your calories in within a 24-hour window. With intermittent fasting, you get everything in between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. With flexible dieting, you get your calories in whatever matters. You might have your final meal at 5 p.m, you might have it at 11 p.m, and you might start eating at 7 a.m, or you might start eating at 9 a.m. It doesn't really matter. Both things allow you to get your calories and your macros in within a 24-hour period. Which remains to be said, both of these things actually work, but none of which are actually better than the other in terms of, which is better for fat loss. Something I've already mentioned is that, fat loss essentially comes down to being in a calorie deficit. And if you can achieve a calorie deficit within a 24-hour period, any form of dieting is going to work. It doesn't matter whether you're fasting for a period of that time or whether you're spreading your meals out throughout the day. So it doesn't really matter, guys. When it comes to the argument of intermittent fasting versus flexible dieting, what you've got to understand is which one of those is going to be better for your lifestyle. Are you the kind of person that doesn't enjoy eating in the morning? Do you not enjoy eating late at night? Or do you have problem with late night snacking? If that's you, you might be better with intermittent fasting. If you are super hungry every single time that you wake up in the morning, or if you enjoy leaving a load of calories left over at night so that you can, eat a lot of food while you're watching TV or catching up on Netflix, then flexible dieting is going to be better for you. That's why flexible dieting is better for me, for example. So you have to look at both things not from a fat loss perspective. Both of them have the same effect on fat loss, providing calories are controlled and everything is taken in within a 24-hour period. But what you can look at both is, which one is going to be more adherable to you? Which one is going to suit your lifestyle a bit better? Which one's going to suit your eating preferences better? That's how you have to look at this argument. Neither of which is better for fat loss. They both work, providing you get everything right in the details. So that's what you've got to understand, guys. But hopefully, you now understand that final point. So then, guys, that brings an end to today's video. Hopefully throughout this video, I have been able to, clear up some of the major myths surrounding nutrition and surrounding the fitness industry. And hopefully I've been able to kind of settle your mind a little bit. And the big thing I want from this video is hopefully I've now been able to open up your mind a little bit to the concept of flexible dieting. And for you to be able to understand that, there is so much freedom with dieting that you haven't yet understood because you've been held back by these myths. But hopefully I've been able to kind of open you up to that idea a little bit more. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you for part 3 of this mini-series. Have a good day and I'll see you soon.